Working is presented by Maya Strategy Group, a leading market research and strategy consulting firm, helping clients in the pet care and animal health industries navigate strategic challenges for almost 2 decades. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pet Working. I'm Peter Kensath, Vice President at Maya Strategy Group, and really excited to join today by 2 guests to discuss in return to our and elaborate on our previous work on pet trackers. Over the last few months, several months actually, I've been trialing a pet tracker, a new pet tracker to the market with Peony from a company called Invoxia, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by Invoxia's CEO, Amélie Cadron. And also our first return guest to the podcast, we have Dr. Cade Wilson, founder of Scope Micro and the founder and owner of Clark County Animal Hospital, leading veterinary practice, award-winning veterinary practice in Southeast Oklahoma. So Cade and I met at VMX, back in 2021. We did an episode on Scope earlier this year. And I've had the pleasure of corresponding with Amélie over the last several months as Peony and I have been trialing our Invoxia pet tracker. So Cade, Amélie, thank you so much for joining and welcome to Pet Working. Or Cade, welcome back.
Hey, thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for inviting us.
Absolutely. I'm excited. So the genesis for this, way back, I think probably the 4th episode we did of Pet Working, I had another friend in the pet tracker space, Andrew Blyman, who's the EVP of Tractive, joined me, and we talked about the overall pet tracker market. And one of the things I was really shocked to learn about is that the pet tracker market has about the same market penetration as pet insurance. It's very, very low. Andrew estimated back when we talked earlier this year, I think that was back in May, he mentioned that market awareness for pet trackers in the United States is probably only 5% of pet owning households. So if we think there's over 100 million dogs and cats combined, about 65 million of that 100 million are dogs, and that's probably the biggest market for a pet tracker. Under 5%, we're looking at over 60 million dogs that are not wearing a tracker, and probably only, and that's market awareness. So I think Andrew had estimated that maybe only 1 million pet trackers have been sold in the U.S. At this point. So the market is really small, but when we look at the utility for it, it's huge. I'm a big proponent of it, like I am for most things, not only because of what I see in my consulting practice, but what I see, in my personal experience with Peony. And the first year we had her, we did a summer of off-leash training. I took her out mountain biking in October, and she was good for about the first half hour, and then she ran off. And it took about 2 hours for me to find her, biking around the trails, shaking a tin of treats. And it was one of the most nerve-wracking, heart-wrenching, 2-hour periods of my life, because I was sitting there, I was like, there's a real chance here we might not find her. And when we look at, the statistics, about 1/3 of all dogs and cats in the U.S. are reported missing in their lifetimes, and more than 80% of those that go missing are never found. We have about 10 million dogs and cats that are lost and stolen in the U.S. each year. So that's 8 million dogs every year, dogs and cats that are separated from their families and never reunited. So I think just pet trackers in general is a huge, huge, huge opportunity for pet parents to better protect and care for their pets. And it's a huge business opportunity for the companies that are getting into the market. But beyond just GPS tracking, Amélie, Invoxia is kind of pushing the limits. And one of the things I was really excited about when we discussed having Peony and I trial it, is that you're getting not only into activity monitoring and location tracking, like a lot of the existing trackers in the market do, but you were first to market with a heart monitor. And so this device has a heart monitor in it, and it tracks heart signature, and it also tracks resting heart rate and resting respiratory rate, along with a whole other host of beta features. Do you want to talk a little bit, Amelie, about the impetus for the development of the smart collar and the success you're seeing within the market so far?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I think it's interesting to go back from a historical point of view on what's happened in the pet tracking space. So I think there was a huge boom of interest around the quantified self and activity monitors for humans with a Fitbit, that had a kind of a golden era. And it sparked a lot of different activity trackers that were a bit, not say basic, but more like step trackers for dogs. And then there was the GPS tracking era, and now you have a lot of good products on the market that get more and more awareness with both GPS and activity tracking. You also have the AirTag that's coming, and I think that's increasing awareness for the pet tracker space. And what was interesting for us was to go really deeper into the dog health and providing a device that really provides a 360 degree of a dog's well-being and health state. So we launched in the beginning of this year in April the first biometric dog collar. So it's a collar that does AI-based activity insights. So it tells if the dog is running, walking, sleeping, drinking, barking, etc. Then there is the GPS tracking feature with the live GPS tracking, and that's of course one of the big reasons why people are looking for such devices, especially since now dogs are really full on like family members, and you can't really explain to them what happens if they get lost, etc. So there is a lot of stress around, I don't want to lose my pet. There is also a lot of like a purebred dog theft in Paris, for instance, and people get a lot of anxiety around like keeping an eye on their pet. And then there's this whole new world open on dog preventive health, with this so this biometric data, as you mentioned, so a resting heart rate and respiratory rate, which are vital signs for the dog, and the heart signature. I'm just going to say a few words maybe on those metrics. They are quite important because a dog's heart reveals a lot of things about their health state. And until now, it was very difficult to get this type of data because the optical sensors, the electrical sensors that you use for humans, they won't work with the dog's fur. So it's the first time, thanks to AI and a mix of different type of movement sensors, that we're able to retrieve those metrics, and those metrics contain a lot of valuable information on the dog's health state. So we're launching a lot of research projects around being able to uncover new digital biomarkers of health, of illness, of stress, of aging, because we're building the biggest database of resting heart rate and respiratory rate for dogs at home in their usual environment as opposed as the clinic. So it's really opening new doors into preventive health.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that I think we may even be seeing a greater focus on preventative health from wearables with Invoxia in the animal medicine space than in the human medicine space, right? And I want to get Kate's perspective here as a clinician and the value he would see in having patients bring this data into the practice. But I think we were all talking before we jumped on the call. We're all smartwatch wearers. And I've worn a smartwatch for years. I could go, I'm a Samsung guy, but I can go back into S Health by Samsung and I can see my heart rate, my over years. I can see my body composition now with the latest iteration of the watch. There's so much health data there. Yet I haven't seen any, I bring up the fact that I wear it every year at my physical, and I've yet to see any interest from any clinician about, my smartwatch data. I know health insurance companies are working to try to take smartwatch data and use that, to better inform their actuarial models, to potentially offer discounts to healthier patients. Life insurance companies definitely, but there's not really a huge interest from what I've seen on the clinical side. And Cade, as Amelie said, there's to me there's such a big unlock from a preventative medicine perspective here, in just being able to kind of see a baseline and understand if things have changed, and having that be a trigger as to, hey, maybe I need to bring my pet to the vet. The other thing that I thought was interesting that Amelie said, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, is being able to get that data outside of the clinic, because I know, for a lot of pets, bringing them into the vet is a stressful experience. So it can be difficult for you to get actual good respiratory or heart rate data on a pet when they're in your office. And if you had access to that from outside, that, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about how that can help your clinical analysis and evaluation of an animal.
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff you just punted to me right there. There's a lot of stuff. And yes, I'm just like you guys. I have this smartwatch that some days I think is smarter than me, but there is so much data as an athletic guy that I take from that for myself. And I agree. My physicians don't want to know anything about that. I know they're busy, but there's so much data that we could give to people about our own health via a smartwatch. I look at it, Peter. I think you look at it for yourself. And when these callers first came to my, first brought to me, Peter, I think you were the first one that said, "Hey, do you know anything about these specific callers?" And there's been several people that have brought GPS collars to my attention, which are great. There's been so many. When they first came out, the first thing was people were always mistaking how microchips worked, and they always wanted them to be tracked GPS, and that's just not a thing. And so it gave me something to say, hey, if you're interested in GPS tracking, look at these collars. And then the smart collar from Invoxia came to my attention via Peter. And at first I kind of rolled my eyes, but I went into it to read about what they bring to the table that others haven't. And this biometric data really, really got my attention as a veterinarian, because there was no other source for that, and as a practicing veterinarian every day, and as this morning, I've already seen 2 cardiac cases, that when I'm looking at the heart rate and respiratory rate in the room, I don't always know if that's the reality of what goes on at home. Dogs get white coat syndrome just like people. They get nervous, and changing that data that I'm writing in my chart or taking down from my computer system, I don't know if that's what reality is at home. And so first of all, that resting heart rate in a dog's, we're going to use dogs right now, normal environment, man, that'd be so helpful for me in diagnosing different types of cardiac related diseases. The other flip to that coin is, once I started treatment, if I had that data prior to starting treatment, how that changed once that dog is on different medications. Did it change the heart rate? Did it change its respiratory rate? And knowing those baseline numbers would make me such a much better clinician. That's just talking about the rates of respiratory or the rate of heart rate. Once I looked into those geometric shapes, Emily, correct me if I'm wrong. So it comes with like geometric shapes based on that cardiac rhythm or electrical impulse. Is that right?
Here, Kate, I can
cardiac rhythms.
Yeah, and so
yeah,
so those pets are going to have they're going to show that snapshot like you're seeing on the screen of how that dog's blood flow is. the changes before and after medication would be so helpful to me. And if somebody could, there's people call me all the time. I live in an area that we do a lot of our own after hours emergency type care. And so if somebody's pet is on a medication and they call me and say, wow, their rhythm has changed, or their respiratory rate has changed, or wow, they seem to be like their heart is working harder. Well, what does that really mean? I'm trying to visualize that through a person's eyes that maybe using verbiage and words that mean something different to them that they mean to me medically. And so if they could then say, hey, I'm going to send you over, these biometric information, then I can actually make a good decision of whether this is worthy of an emergency or there's something else going on. And so they are very interesting to me as far as just the heart and respiratory monitoring goes. Because I've got baselines, and I've got baselines after treatment or after we change to different medications. So I'm very intrigued, as well as, and that's not even talking about our activity trackers. If we put a medication in a patient and all of a sudden their activity levels dropped, hey, we need to evaluate what we just did. Or if we start a medication and all of a sudden they increase their abilities, then we know we're on to something good. And so those are data points that could be invaluable. Now, the flip side of that, we feel, and a lot of people in veterinary medicine feel like, oh my gosh, I don't have enough time in a day for what I do. There's always people that all of a sudden think, oh man, I don't want more work. But man, if you can take this data and improve the life of your patient, you should. And so I'm very intrigued from everything I've seen so far.
Yeah, I think, I mean, just looking through that, this is, a sampling, from a few months back, 4 consecutive months, to kind of show a baseline for Peony. And I was confused by the heart signature at first. I was like, how do I interpret this? But Amelie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that, the way most people can look at this is this is like an EKG for a dog, correct? And so,
Similar.
Not necessarily, I was looking at the app this morning, and I think one of the great features that you've added since I put this graph together a few months back. We had to postpone recording of this a little bit, but so we have an outdated logo and data from May to August as opposed to more recently. But, I think it does show the baseline. But one of the things I thought was really cool on looking at the app today is that you've added in a thing saying, no AFib detected. And so, being able to give pet parents and veterinarians access to understanding, like, is there, an irregular rhythm in your dog's heart? Or, as long as, if we're not seeing atrial fibrillation, I can say it. And, we're seeing a consistent pattern, that's a marker of good health. Similarly, if we, I was really encouraged to see, look, her heart rate is, staying between 60 and 64 beats a minute. Her respiratory rate is, right around 15 to 16. And that's consistent over months of time. Now, I'm not a veterinarian, but as a pet parent, if I'm monitoring this and all of a sudden I see a sharp increase or a sharp decrease over this baseline average, that's a great signal to me of, hey, you might want to get your dog in, you might want to get Peony in to get checked out. And that I think is where it can be so valuable in preventative health, because dogs are so good at masking pain and masking symptoms. And if they're not getting into the vet regularly, oftentimes we see cases. We did an episode on preventative diagnostics earlier this year with Dr. Ben Hantler at HESCA, and we talked about the number of cases where if the pet was brought in earlier, they would have had, their prognosis and their treatment protocol would have been far easier, or had a far greater likelihood of success. And I think that's where we see, there's such great benefit to preventative medicine. Um,
Yes, this is a very important point. If I take just cardiac disease for dogs, and I think Kate will back me on that, it's estimated that about 10% of dogs have a cardiac disease, and people are not aware of it. So if the vet has not talked about it, they won't know that it exists. They don't even suspect it, unless they have a breed that is very heavily predisposed, like the Doberman Pinschers, for instance. Um, and so most of these dogs, they will not be diagnosed early enough. And when they get diagnosed, it's already too late. It's because the symptoms become so obvious that you can't miss them. And usually it's when the dog goes into congestive heart failure, which means that the the dog's heart is not able to pump blood properly, which means that the liquid will fill the lungs, or it will fill the belly, and the dog is like has a very weird shape on their belly, etc. And in that case, I mean, it's not non-reversible. So you can try to stabilize the dog and try to prolong their life, but it's already kind of too late. And today there are some medications that have been discovered to actually extend the healthy lifespan of dogs that are into cardiac disease. The issue of those labs that have those medications is that the dog is not diagnosed early enough to get the benefits from this. And that's where monitoring those resting heart rate and respiratory rate are very important. The idea is not to, so you can distinguish between a seemingly healthy dog, for instance, or just a healthy dog. And then with monitoring the baseline and monitoring the signature, you see that it's stable through time. And maybe it will, the signals that we show are less precise than when you get to the vet. So it's less precise than when you get to the vet, where you get echocardiogram and things that give you a very precise snapshot of your dog's health. But you will have those signals, less precise signals through time, and it's those small changes that get interesting. And that's where we need to have this pre-processing step, not to put all the complexity of analyzing this data on the vet. It's not the idea that the vet will have tons of data and needs to see if there has been changes, but us to build those digital biomarkers of disease, for instance, of changes, and be able to notify the pet parent. Like the goal is really to turn this into a pre-diagnosis. It's not to replace the vet. It's not to add complexity to the vet. It's just adding a pre-diagnosis step where we say, hey, it seems like your golden retriever that's 6 years old has something that's getting a bit odd. Maybe you should see the vet. And as you mentioned, you go to you take your pet to the vet once a year. And since the pet's lifespan are much shorter than for human, it's like if we humans went to the doctor every 10 years and hope that things do not go undetected and do not go wrong in the meantime. So yeah, and as Kate mentioned, if you have a sick pet, so a pet that has been diagnosed with a cardiac disease, with epilepsy, with osteoarthritis, of course, it's very interesting for the vet to be able to take data-driven decisions, to adapt and adjust the treatment based on the baseline before the pet was sick, while the pet was sick, and while under treatment. So the idea is to bridge the gap between the pet parent and the vet, so that the vet gets the patient when it's still time to do something, and then they can monitor that the treatment is going right and improve the quality of treatment and ultimately the quality of life and lifespan of the dog.
I think
yeah, and I think in a lot of cases, and Kate, jump in here, but for me, I look at my relationship with my doctor and my relationship with my vet as a partnership, right? And they may not always want the data. Maybe they don't want my smartwatch data. Maybe they
should.
but being able to be an active participant in your health and being an active participant and advocate for your pet's health, um, to me, and I'm not the veterinarian here, so Kate, speak up. But like to me, that's the best kind of patient, right? Is somebody who is attuned to what's going on with their pet and uh, is asking questions and providing you data and having those frequent check-ins of and making sure that everything is okay with their dog or cat or other animal.
Yeah, I think she did a great job of explaining all that. I think she did a really great job. And so from my perspective, um, there's several points. So having that data, number one, it gives me an extra point to be able to tell somebody like this is why it's time to do medication. There are so many times that patients come into me, I talk about a heart murmur, I talk about the grade of that heart murmur. We may be taking an x-ray and looking at the changes to the heart, maybe doing an EKG, all these different things to try to explain when is it time. Because people don't want to medicate your dog. They don't want to medicate their own dog if they don't need to. And so there's a fine line of when it's time and when it's not time. And so this gives me an extra data point to say, look at the changes. You brought them to me. You're an active participant in this with this type of data to say, look at the spray chart on that's what they would call that, by the way, on that heart slide, the spray chart where it shows the little red dots. Look at the changes that have just occurred in the last month, or look at the change in the heart rate. The resting heart rate is now much more increased because this heart inefficiency to pump blood the correct way. So, just like Emily said, you're getting backflow of blood into the lungs, let's say with congestive heart failure. It would give me the data to say, hey, in July, the heart rate was 61, but now our resting heart rate is 80. Something has changed. And now that would give me something to say, we need to help the efficiency of this heart. The other thing, I say this a lot when I'm explaining radiographs to people. You got to know what normal looks like. And so the important thing about the biometric data that we're seeing here is we could now know what normal is for that specific pet, not what normal looks like for dogs in general. What does normal look like for your dog? And as we have data over months and months and months of time, if we start seeing sharp changes, there's something wrong. And if that's an AI algorithm from Invoxia side that triggers that gets that patient into care of somebody like me quicker, then we can make things better quicker. The deeper we dig a hole, with some sort of disease, whatever that shall be, the deeper we dig that, the harder it is for us to ever get back to normal, if we can. And so, I think this data has great potential. Again, you've got to get people that want to use it. But if somebody like me, I'm very interested in that. I'm going to use any data you get me that I can help your pet get better faster. But if that means from the Invoxia side, it's just triggering, hey, you need to get your pet in, and this is why, that's great. So like I said, I've said this multiple times, I'm really intrigued by the potential for this.
Yeah, and we haven't even gotten it. You alluded to a little bit earlier, Kate, but the tracking data and biomarkers that it generates. I wanted to get into that a little bit with you, Amelie, because I know a lot of these features are still in beta, and there's one that I know we talked about months ago, but I'd love to hear if there's any further consideration for incorporating it. But in addition to respiratory rate and heart signature. I'm just looking at my app here. We have, the active time. So if you have a pet that maybe is in a fenced-in yard or on an e-fence or something, and you're not with them all day, or maybe they're just on the house all day and you can't see how active they're being. This will give you a view into, how much are they moving around, what's their normal activity level, how much time are they spending walking, how much time are they spending running, how much time are they spending trotting, how much time are they spending resting. All of those are features that you have. They're not listed as beta, Amelie. So I think you know the assumption on my end is that you
They're
feel pretty
good.
confident
Yeah.
in those. But I'm also seeing on the app we have being petted, playing, eating, drinking, barking, um, time spent in the car, driving. Obviously, your dog isn't going to be driving, but time in the car
Maybe.
with you. Uh, if Peony starts driving, we'll have a problem. But when we look at things like that, like if I would think like if you see a sharp uptake in the time that your pet is spending drinking, that might be indicative of maybe like a kidney problem or something like that, right, Kate? Or
Oh, for
another
sure.
one.
Think about lameness things. Think about if you had a pet that's had a lameness issue and you can track his abilities. Is he running around? Is he not? Is he walking? Where were we before the injury? Where are we now? I do a lot of ACL surgeries, so tracking their abilities post-operatively. There's a lot of things there that you can utilize if you're willing to think outside the box and do it. I think that I hope, and I'm sure Emily is like this too. I hope in 10 years that would be normal data. I hope
Right.
it should, but you've got to be willing to take that information and utilize it. And so again, the potential is unbelievable.
And I think it's really cool. The other thing, Emily, I noticed, in the latest update of the app that you have a thing. There's a button now you can generate a report to send to your vet. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so you don't even have to be in the vet with your app to kind of show them the data. You can generate a report and email it over. I think that'll make things a lot easier for veterinarians. But on the activity side of things, like I'm I'm really intrigued by the, particularly the drinking and the barking too. One thing I wonder, I know, one of the leading companies out there in the market, Whistle, which is owned by Mars Pet Care, they have one of the, I don't think they have any sort of heart monitor, respiratory rate capabilities or anything like that, but they do have a pretty good activity tracker. And one of the things I
Mm-hmm.
know they have teased a lot with the Pet Insight project that they're doing um, is to monitor scratching. And if the pet is scratching a lot, that could be indicative of a dermatological condition or an allergy. And they're sending alerts from the Whistle tracker to pet parents to say, hey, maybe you need to bring them to the vet. And then the other thing that they're doing, obviously Mars is a huge ecosystem, and in addition to Whistle, they also own Wisdom Panel. The Pet Insight Project, they're marrying the genetic data with the activity data, with the health record data. And so they're trying to generate predictive algorithms to say, like, okay, we saw this in this dog with this activity pattern and this genetic, these genetics, this might be predictive of this condition in the future. Do you have any plans, partnerships like that, in the works for Invoxia? Is that something that's on the roadmap, something that you're considering?
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, the way it works, I'm just going to say a few words because we are a French startup. It did not introduce the company. We're a French startup and we're specialized in what we call AIoT, which means we build hardware products from A to Z, smart products that we've won multiple awards on our innovative product lines. And also, we have a very good team that does the AI around the data that we collect. So we have this vision that, if you bring a good product, a good sensor on the market, it will collect the data. On this data, you will build, added value services that will increase the value of the product. So people will wear it more and it will generate more data. And it's like a virtuous circle that's very interesting. And what the team has built is a great capability for the product to learn to detect a new pattern based on movement. So what we can do is we can do a data collection. Let's say that we want to detect, I don't know, epilepsy seizure, for instance. Then you put the device on a dog, and while the dog is having a seizure, you will collect the data. We have something in the app that does it specifically. And then we can train a deep neural network, so an AI model, and we will integrate it in the product directly. This is something that we can do, miniaturize it, integrate it directly in the product. And then the product will be able to detect this particular pattern, let's say the seizure, and send an alert when it happens. And it's something that we can do on any type of movement pattern that is quite specific. So it's something that with a human eye, you would be able to, if you see a dog doing that, you know that it's this type of pattern. We would be able to detect it with AI. And that's what we've done. And we've gone, so Mars Pet Care is doing it with Whistle too. That's what they did with the Pet Insight project. We also used millions of dog and cat days of worth of data to train the models and improve them. And we can refine the models because, of course, you need to have seen a lot of different dogs in different contexts to make sure that you have a very good accuracy on the field, which is why some of these features are still in beta. But it means that we are able to track a number of different things that are good for engagement with the product. You have this thing where you will receive alerts. It will happen soon, but alerts when your dog is in the car, for instance. So if you've led them with a dog sitter, for instance, you'll know when they're in the car, when they've started their pet walk, etc. And so it has this kind of nice thing where if you're in the office and you miss your dog, you will still get some real-time alerts of what the pet is up to. Then of course it can also it's also important for their happiness, the active time of the dog. What's tricky with dog activity is that it depends a lot on the pet parent's availability. For instance, if you take them on a big walk and you let them roam freely in the forest, they'll have a great day. But if it's rainy outside and you only just take them around the block, you will have a very little active time, but it won't mean that the dog is sick or they're in pain. It just means that you've been less available for them. So the interpretation is kind of tricky. But overall, a good active day is a happy dog. So it's something that also, kind of rewards you for this. And the last thing, as you mentioned, was monitoring changes. So things that could indicate pain, things that could indicate kidney disease. And we have the same thing with the biometric data, is the ability to build some digital biomarkers that include both activity and biometric data to say, okay, there is a high score, a high probability that this specific pet has this kind of issue. And so we should send an alert to tell them to go see the vet. So that's the vision. And of course, to build those biomarkers, we need more data on the state of health of specific pets, to train models to say, okay, when you see this type of metrics, it means that the dog has this. So now learn to detect it automatically. And for this, we have the medical records of our pets in the app because, we're able to send surveys and ask questions to our users, and they play along. So that's a very good source of data. But we're also in discussion with tons of different actors from the pet industry that are interested in the data and that have a specific ability to say, okay, this dog has this type of issue, just like Wisdom Panel does with Mars, for instance. So we'll have exciting partnerships to announce early 2024.
You said that those are coming. You guys will be at CES, and is that where you're going to announce the partnerships?
It will be after. So at CES, we'll be announcing a new product, and after CES, we'll be announcing the partnerships.
Very, very cool.
Few weeks afterwards. So stay tuned.
Well, we'll be keeping our eyes out on CES and on your news feed and press releases in the period that follows. I know we're getting close to the end of our time here, but I did want to ask, Amelie, you mentioned, training the models, with the AI to recognize certain movement. Is that something, if you wanted to add a new behavior or activity to track, is that something that you can push out to existing callers in the field? So if you wanted to add a scratching tracker, would you just be able to push that out and, you know, callers that are in the field would be able to benefit from the work that you're doing in the lab?
Yes, yes, yes. That's really the magic of having a connected product is that it will evolve all the time. And what's even more interesting is that we can push a proposition to participate in a data collection study for scratching, for instance, to our users, just like Mars did with the Pets Inside project. But people already have the color and they just need to record some, some events of scratching with the app, with something specific in the app that we would, release to these specific users that have opted in to participate. And then we can train the models on real life data, which is very valuable because, data in the lab or in specific condition is never the same as having broad data of various dogs in real life conditions. And then we can push it to them specifically, let's say beta test these things and give us feedback that it worked well or not, and then deploy it to all our users. So that's really the magic of, having a constantly evolving product. And as you saw, we added a few features along the way since the April launch.
That's very cool. Yeah, I know I'm still on a first generation device here, and we can show everybody how easy it is to get on. Beanie, come here. Come, Beanie, come. No, you're just gonna stay down there, sleeping. Okay.
Hi.
All right. Well, we won't show you how easy it is
Oh,
to put
well.
on. That's fine. You don't want to
We'll
make a
believe you.
cameo.
Yeah, the hardest part is catching the dog.
Oh, I can go off camera and go down and get her, but the uh very easy to put on. You just slip it around the neck and just a simple cinch. Stays on. I know, Emily, there is a next generation out, and I'm excited to test that out as well. But the you mentioned, some of the big improvements between the first generation and the second generation collar are in battery life and any other you know improvements that folks can expect from the first to the second generation collar.
So I don't want to spoil the CES announcement there, but there will be exciting new features coming with
How long are you? What you were saying, you can go 3 weeks on a charge in between with the battery
so
life on the latest version.
yes, yes, yes. We're aiming between 2 weeks and a month, and it's always on. So
Which is awesome, from the GPS perspective and being able to track. And I think it's so great, that we're seeing, not only the GPS benefit of pet trackers, but the market really evolving to this preventative health. And as you mentioned earlier, Cade, when I said, the market awareness for pet trackers in the US is 5 to 15%.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people, that 5 to 15%, think that a microchip is a pet tracker. So,
A lot. Yeah, a lot of them. Yes.
And a microchip you can read it if your pet is found. But I'll put my PSA out for everybody again. A microchip is not a beacon. It's not going to locate your pet for you. To do that, you got to have a GPS collar, and it's a market that I think is ripe for explosion, and it's really cool to see companies like Invoxia adding these exciting new features that not only keep our pets safe and allow us to know where they are and make sure that we keep all of the members of our family together, but also make sure that we're better able to monitor and protect the health of our furry family members. Great. I don't know if you have any parting thoughts or questions for Amelie before we go.
I mean, again, I think that the potential for the biometric data is unbelievable. I think that the chances that we could treat conditions earlier or make switches sooner when, if we had the data points to say, oh my gosh, this heart rate is changed for the better or for the worse once we started potential treatment, or to be able to back up that it's time for the next step or it's time for the first step. I think that is not just for heart related illnesses, but also for pain or arthritic changes, or just changes in the pet's lifestyle. That would be very helpful in the eyes of a veterinarian, that we could be making the right decisions for those pets and those owners. So I applaud what's occurred so far, and I'm very excited for the future.
Thank you, Cade.
Yeah.
I'll bounce on that by saying that we're very happy that we've had raving reviews from our first users. Some people that had the cardiac dogs called it a game changer for them, being able to monitor the data and react fast in case something goes wrong. And as Cade mentioned, it's only the beginning, so we'll be very excited to release new hardware versions, new features, and new scientific breakthrough in the coming months.
Yeah, I think it's a super exciting frontier. I feel very fortunate to have been able to trial it here with Peony, and it definitely gives me that peace of mind that she may be nearing her birthday if they got her age right when we adopted her, but she's still going strong, and the things that we're doing for her are working. I hope other folks out there can look at this and maybe have some inspiration, to take their pet's health into their own hands. And from a business perspective, I think this I'm really excited to see the potential growth in the market over the coming years as more people realize become aware of these devices and realize the potential that they have for both themselves and their pets. Right. Well, Cade, Amelie, thank you so much. This has been an awesome conversation. Thanks everybody for taking the time to join us today. This is Peter Kenseth, Vice President at my Strategy Group, on behalf of Cade and Amelie. This has been another episode of Pet Working, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Cade. See you.
Bye.
Working is presented by Maya Strategy Group, a leading market research and strategy consulting firm, helping clients in the pet care and animal health industries navigate strategic challenges for almost 2 decades.